Hello, everybody. One of the things that has been coming up a lot lately is what is the helpful content update? Now, one of the things that's really unique about it is that no matter what, nobody knows. Now, I know it sounds a little strange because people have been around, people have been speculating, and people have been telling you what you have to do to keep from getting penalized by this thing. And all of the people measuring the erratic behavior of websites have basically said there's no storm. They haven't seen radical changes. So there's not a lot of information out there. I thought that what I would do is spend a little bit of time describing some possibilities that I believe are actually at play and maybe open some discussion on it if you wish. But for what we've been seeing, I think we have a different view than a great many of the other people out there. So I'm going to describe more about what we're seeing and what we think it means, and some things you may want to pay attention to. So sit down with your notepad. I'm going to go ahead and start. I think that this update was done very much like the Penguin update. Now, the Penguin update was done in layers. You may have seen my social media post on it. By the way, if you're not following me on social media, you might want to do that. But the post was that I think that what we're going to see is some severe violators are going to get hit, and then less severe, and then less severe, and then collateral damage, and then the rest of us. I mean, there's going to be an evolution in how bad it's going to be. And I don't think Google wants to create a content-geddon here. I don't think they want to penalize sites about content because, let's face it, Google likes content. Most of the sites that have been optimized, a great many of them have done content work. If you took out every site that did content work, you're taking out the sites that care about being SEO'd. So I think that there's sort of a two-edged sword at play here, that Google doesn't want to penalize the good sites for doing bad things, but they do want to penalize the bad sites. And sometimes there's collateral damage. I think that's the concern, and I think that's what we're seeing. Now, I refer to it as basically turning up the temperature, turning up the volume, if you will. There's probably a great many things that are in the content update, and some of them I'll comment about. Some of them I may not have seen happen yet. But it is pretty clear to me that there is something at play. Now, one of the reasons I think that the weather stations out there have not seen radical updates is that the radical updates are somewhat focused on long tail page 3 results. They're not focused on the first page. So when we run ranking on our own site, we find our first page is dead steady. I mean, it is pretty flat. We see that many of our first page results are creeping up. More are going up than going down. But I don't have more first page particularly than I did before. If I used to have 100, I have 103. That is not a radical change on page 1. But page 3, I have serious increases. I think that what we're seeing is an erosion of long tail spun content that is close but no cigar. They're taking it out, and my rankings are going up. I think that's what we're seeing. And if you look at your results, I think you'll find page 2 and page 3 rankings maybe creeping up a lot faster than page 1 volatility. So if that's the case, that what we care about is focusing on our content that's page 2 and 3. We have to look at long tail keywords and make sure it's right. Now, what is the goal? I believe the goal is helpful content. Well, now I'm going to get into what is a signal for helpful content. One signal of helpful content is you don't even link to it. These are orphaned pages. These are pages that somebody wrote, and it might be your staff or it might be somebody else if you're accepting posts. You put on your website, but you forgot to take the website pages and link to that content. In other words, there's no path from your home page to that content, or there's only one path to that content, and none of the links are contextual. They're not within the body of any page. If you don't think it's important enough to link to, if you don't think it's helpful, why would Google? So one of the things that our experiments seem to be showing, and it might just be the experiment, but we're finding that pages that are on a website that are not navigationally connected from the top, that are truly orphaned, are the kind of pages that nobody needs. It doesn't have any inbound links. It never shows up in a Google search result. Ask yourself this, does Google need this page in the index? Think about it at the index. Does it need a page in the index to benefit Google if that page never gets linked to, and if that page never shows up in a search result? If there's no visibility to that page to a searcher, how helpful is it? If nobody links to it at all, how helpful is it? It isn't a matter going forward. It isn't going to be a matter of creating content. Creating content that you think is nice is wonderful. But if it's orphaned, if nobody thinks it's helpful, that's the trick. If nobody thinks it's helpful, how helpful is it? Does Google really need 40 trillion pages in the index? Is that something that helps Google? Is that something that helps a searcher? Especially if it never shows up. It may be that it's wonderful for keyword stuffing, or it may be that it's a specific piece of content will show up for that 9-word query. But if it isn't that, it's not helpful. I think that what we're seeing in the helpful update is a way for Google to purge pages. I don't think Google really wants us to fix them. If they're vital pages, go ahead. But I don't think Google wants them fixed. I think Google wants them to go away. Now, how do they motivate people to make them go away? Well, you'll have a lower quality on your site. You'll have a lower quality of your overall site. That site quality is going to have an impact on all your pages. So if I have 100 great pages and 100 not helpful pages, the quality is averaged. My great pages pay a price. They're motivating us to maintain our site. They're motivating us to get rid of the low quality, unhelpful pages. I think that the entire objective is to get rid of trash. Take it out. Make it go away. If it isn't helpful, you don't need it. Now, I think going further, the issue is going to be a much, much larger image. We've got tools. We can run it on your site, and we can tell you which pages are orphaned. Obvious, not that bad. If you're running a spider from the top down, you know what pages are indexed or crawlable. They're not orphaned. That doesn't mean they're in the index. And if they're physically on your site, but they're not crawlable, those are pages that you really don't need. Are they in your XML sitemap? So you're telling Google to index a page that you don't even link to. That's a quality issue. You have to maintain your site. So next, you have to look at all the quality helpful pages and then decide this is helpful, but they've not had a link in the last 2 years. All the links to the page are old. All your links are old. You're not creating content that links to this page, and you're not maintaining the content. How helpful can it be if it's out of date? So now we're into maintenance and how often you spin the content up. Crank it, make it accurate, make it timely. How often do you do that? If a third of your pages have not been touched in 3 years, there's a high probability that Google's going to think your whole site is not helpful. Helpful means that you're helping. That requires an activity. If you're not going to, do the work, you're not going to get the results. And that's a pretty simple thing. So we have orphaning. We have the fact that you're not maintaining it. We have the fact that you won't link to it. Nobody else will link to it. It's never been in a Google search result. Do you really think it's helpful? We have to maintain our content. That's going to be a requirement. And I don't think the average content is being maintained at a level that is really acceptable to Google. If your competition is maintaining it, that's good for them. That's bad for you. What is maintenance? Maintenance is not adding new pages. That is not maintaining your site. Maintaining your site is taking the content that's on your site and making sure it's current, making sure it's appropriate, making sure that it is helpful, not just adding new content. People who have a project and just crank up new stuff, thinking, oh, I have more pages than I had before, therefore Google will love me. This update just totally wipes that out. This is not about adding content. This is about having helpful content. Now, let's back up. Google's been working on this for a long time. What is helpful? Let's get into each. Expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. Folks, helpful content is because you're an expert. You have content that is shareable. You have content that others would refer to. You have authorities that think your content is valuable. Your overall website is trusted, in part because you're maintaining it, in part because you're not keyword stuffing it, in part because you don't have orphan pages everywhere. There's a lot of stuff that goes into what might make a page have a signal of being helpful or unhelpful. As far as I'm concerned, the bottom line of what we're dealing with is the actual content and whether a user would refer to it. If you have content that nobody has ever visited, if you have content that has never been linked to, you have content that is never ranked, you don't even link to it, you don't even maintain it, it's nothing more than just the same as everybody else. How helpful is it? You can ask yourself that about everything. If I'm selling somebody else's product and 50 other people are selling that same product, why am I more helpful than them? I mean, you really have to think that if you're e-commerce. Why am I more helpful than those other sites? I think that's a big part of the helpful content update. I think over time, Google's going to be turning up the volume. And, when the volume gets turned up to 11, you have to excuse my Spinal Tap reference. For those of you who don't know what Spinal Tap is, you probably ought to just look it up. A Marshall amp only goes to 10, so they turned it to 11. I think Google's eventually going to do that. I think Google will get there. I think, I'll tell you what I'm worried about. I'm worried that they're not going to get there until the holiday. I'm worried that a great many sites that are not listening are not going to be changing. Now, the way the helpful update was claimed to be implemented is Google already determined what it was. The dial was turned to 0. It's been live. They've been gathering the data. The index is updated. Everything is live. It's already done. They know about you. It isn't, oh, I better hurry before they spider me. They've already spidered you. What we're seeing is the dial is being turned. When it gets to 11, we're in trouble. But you're going to be seeing a disturbance in the force along the way. I think we all have to pay attention. There's going to be plenty of people speculating on what you got to change, right? Oh my goodness, Google says quick reading, 5-minute read. Does that mean everything in the world has to be short? I don't think so. I think that by topic, some topics that may make sense. If every one of the top 10 is a 5-minute read, I'd think about it. But does that make you helpful content? We don't know. But if what Google says is the index has already got all the data, that probably enabled them to put that up at 5-minute read. And how do they know how long it takes to read something? How many words are there? Divide by, you gotta read, right? It takes me an hour to read that. So you never know. The bottom line is there is uncertainty. Nobody knows exactly what it is, but I will tell you it is here. It is going to happen because the beneficiary of this entire thing is going to be Google. They're going to clean up their index. I think that the big people that are going to pay are the content writers. I'm just spinning out content, charging you and putting it out. You figure out what to do with it. I'm just sending it to you. You just tack it onto your website. You don't connect it. You don't have any integration. It's just mediocre content like everybody else. If you seriously think that's going to help you be in the top 3 out of 10 million, more power to you. I think you either write expert content that's shareable or it's not helpful. That's my take. Don't have to agree. Certainly, I'm sure many of you won't, but that's my take on the helpful content update. Thanks for listening.